Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay. Raise your hand if you could affect. Does anybody need food? Because it's very important, you know, to our mental health and our physical health that we eat. I'm serious. That's a serious statement. I don't know what I can do about that, but I wanted to check. I had to steal my lunch here. I do have one protein bar in my bag downstairs. We could multiply it, cut it into 12 pieces, and we'll see how many people we can feed them. I could do that. Anyway, good afternoon, and welcome again to the 7th Annual Pathways to Hope Conference. I ask another question. How many people have been to this conference before? Wow. Wow. How many people 7 times? Today's piece. Yeah, 6. 5. Oh, we didn't even meet the last 2 years. We did virtually. You count those. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is great. It's great. I think it's the best conference in San Antonio. And it's not just because it's at no cost. It's not it at all. I really do think it has, I think it does have something to do with it. But it's just such important information, and the quality is always just excellent. So it's great to see you here. My name is Ann Holmley, and I'm the faith liaison with the city of San Antonio. So it's good to have you here. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items, and I'm reading them. All registered attendees seeking CEUs. Do we have anybody in this room? Okay. If we didn't, I wasn't going to read it. Anyway, remain in the session for the entire duration for you to get your CEU. Must have signed in with the proctor. Who's the proctor? They're over there. They're raising their hands. You must obtain an evaluation form from your proctor prior to the start of this session. At the end of this session, you will need to check back in with the proctor to turn in your completed evaluation to receive your certificate. Each workshop session is approximately 75 minutes long. You will receive 1.25 CEUs for this session. These are issued to LPC, LMFT, social workers, and psychologists. Each attendee can qualify for a total of 3.75 CEUs today for attending 3 workshops. We are grateful to have the support of NAMI Texas and Barrett County Recast Project for making these CEUs available. Again, all registered attendees seeking CEUs must remain in the session for the entire duration. Upon completion, when you turn your completed evaluation form, you will receive your certificate. And now, that was exciting, right? I would ask if there are any questions. Answers, so I'm not going to ask that. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Justin Lindstrom, who I've known longer than we're going to talk about here, but he's been an Episcopal priest for 23 years and currently serves at Christ Episcopal Church here in San Antonio. With Patrick, who spoke this morning about his sister. Was that amazing? He's the Associate Rector there for Community Formation. He oversees children, youth, college, and young adult ministry, as well as all the outreach to the city and county. And that's where we do all of our work together. Justin serves in the Bridges to Care Steering Committee, is the Vista Collaborative of that cohort in his area, and is a member of the planning team for the Pathways to Hope Conference. He's also co-chair of the Episcopal Diocese of West Texas Mental Health Commission. I didn't know that, Justin. That's kind of cool. I'll remember it though. For some reason in the near future I'll be remembered. And Claudette Anderson, Copeland, are you in here? There she is. It's been ages since I've seen her. Ages. Claudette is a native of Buffalo, New York, graduate of the University of Connecticut with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. She earned the MDiv degree from the International Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia. That's denominational. She earned the Doctorate of Ministry degree from the United Theological Seminary in Dayton and a postdoctoral certificate from Oxford University in the UK. She's a former Air Force chaplain, pastor emerita of the New Creation Christian Fellowship Church, where she has served for 34 years. She's the founder of the Women's Educational and Healing Retreats, where they are healing invisible wounds and teaching people to get well. And lastly, Vickie, right here. Right there, and it's been so long.
It's been a long time.
This is like big reunion time. Yay, Vickie Hollon, ordained Baptist minister. Vickie's primary call has been lived through pastoral care, education, leadership, and the work of the local church. Undergirding all of her roles and responsibilities has been a commitment to whole persons, including their mental health. Vickie began serving on the pastoral staff of Trinity Baptist here in San Antonio, January 2010. Her primary responsibility was equipping, empowering, caring for, and ministering alongside older adults. In addition, Vickie developed church-wide adult small groups. Prior to San Antonio, Vickie lived and served for 15 years as executive director of the Wayne E. Oates Institute in Louisville, an organization committed to advance collaborative and compassionate care for the whole person by working with lay and professional caregivers in nursing, religion, social work, medicine, psychology, and other therapeutic professions. Ecumenical by nature, at the same time, Vickie taught for 10 years on the adjunct faculty of Drury University's global online Doctor of Ministry program. You know, when we meet each other, we should be giving each other our bios. We never get this far, right? Vickie's been married to Les Hollon, oh, there's the challenge, right? For over 46 years, and while Les served 43 of those years as senior pastor, Vickie embraced the role of pastor's wife. Vickie and Les both retired from Trinity following Christmas this past year, 2021. They are blessed by their 3 adult children who now live and serve, and I mean they serve, here in San Antonio. We do a whole while on all of them, along with their spouses, and Vickie and Les's 4 young grandchildren. And I think now they're like seeing the world as they retired. I follow them on Facebook, and I live vicariously through you. So I'm going to hand it over to Justin. Thank you all for being here. Yay! Let's do this.
It is great to be in person just about anywhere, but to be here with you all is just such a blessing. We're going to divide this up, the 3 speakers that were just introduced. We're going to take a little bit of time to talk about the topic of the day, the faith community and our collective trauma over the last 2.5 years. And then we hope that there'll be some time then for Q&A where you could ask Vickie and Claudette all the questions. So I'm on the planning committee for this, and what was interesting is we had this beautiful slate of workshops, right? And then we started talking as a planning committee that we were really kind of talking around the issue. And the issue is the individual and collective trauma that we've all experienced. Not just those who are struggling with their mental health, but all of us, right? And so, and it was in that moment that I told a story to our planning team that everything changed for me vividly during COVID when a 42-year-old, I'm 50, at the time I was 48, but a 42-year-old in our congregation had COVID. And it was the summer of 2020 that he had it. But on the 26th of December, he didn't feel good. 6 months later, didn't feel good. So his wife and 2 young children said, well, we're going to go for a walk. Do you want to come with us? He said, no, I'm just not feeling good. Really struggling to breathe, all that kind of stuff. But not so much so that, that he should be rushed to the hospital. And the wife and kiddos came home, and they found him dead in the bathroom.
Thank you so much.
And that changed my whole world, right? Because that was somebody who was close to my age. Someone that was a in direct ministry with me, right? I oversee young adults. And I never fathomed that would happen. and it did. And I was recalling that in the last 2.5 years, I've been a part of more funerals than the previous 20 years of ministry combined. I mean, just think about that, right? From a perspective of a clergy person and our call. And I've seen more sickness and illness than I have in the previous 20 years combined. Yet I haven't been able to minister in the way that I was trained to minister, right? So those of us who are called to ministry, either as clergy or lay ministers, we're trained to be present with people, right? The ministry of presence, right? And not presence like we get at Christmas, but presence, CE. And so we're called to go to the hospitals, go to people's homes, sit with folks. And I'm a big doer, and people who know me in this room know that I like to do stuff. And if I'm not busy, there's something going on. And so I've had to learn over the years that when you walk into a hospital room or a household, to just simply be in the presence with one another is the gift. You don't really have to do anything. A young man early in my ministry who was 16, who was suffering from testicular cancer, taught me that when I walked into his hospital room and he was bald and I'm bald, right? And I'm bald because I chose to be, and he's bald because he's going through chemo. And I'm a young priest, and I try to do something. So I said, hey, let's say the Lord's Prayer together. He's like, that sounds great. And about halfway through, I messed it up. I didn't know the Lord's Prayer. Like, I totally stopped. And Rob turned to me and he goes, I'll finish. It's okay. I learned then that I really didn't have to do a whole lot, just be in presence with each other, and that was the gift enough, right? But for 2 years, that wasn't possible. We would get calls of people who are in the hospital and people who are struggling and that kind of thing, and most of the time we couldn't go see them. So it was a ministry of presence through the phone or through letters or through that God's forsaken tool called Zoom, right, that I think all of us are tired of. But ministry changed drastically. And when people did pass away and die from COVID or from other things, if you were lucky, we were able to have a funeral and to begin that healing and grieving process. But many didn't have that opportunity right away. I've even heard of some celebrating the life of family members a year to maybe even 2 years later after the death. And so we think about all of that, and we began to talk about then on the planning committee that there is an individual and collective trauma that we've all gone through, a significant amount of trauma. When we think about the sheer numbers of people who have died and those who are struggling with COVID even to this day, on top of all the other stuff that's going on in our world and in our nation, and the struggles that we face all the time. And I think, not to get into politics, but personally have seen within the church a greater degree of a chasm between one side and the other. And less ability, even within the church, less ability for us to have open and honest conversations about what we're struggling with, because everything's been so politicized. And as hard as we try to pull people together in the name of God, we still struggle to do that in some form or fashion. So there's many, many factors that are pushing us away from each other. And that's, to me, that is what I think that the trauma is, right? We're in a crisis of relationship. A crisis of relationship, where we are struggling to figure out how to be in relationship with each other again, coming out of COVID. But I think we were struggling prior to that with how to have a civil discourse, how to be together if we come from different faith backgrounds, how to be together if we come from different political backgrounds, how to work together, and ultimately how to have compassion for one another and how to walk with each other. And when we couldn't physically walk with each other, how do we do that virtually, or how do we do that spiritually and prayerfully. So all of those things have truly affected my ministry, but ultimately they've affected me deeply and spiritually as well, and I've been traumatized. And I'm blessed because I'm married to someone who is bold and tells it like it is. And in June of 2021, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 49, on top of everything else that's going on. And it was early July, so it was about 3 weeks into this. My wife turned to me and she goes, "Find a therapist. It's not me." Right? You are so right. And she said, she goes, "It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you got 2 hours. Because most of these places are going to be closed at 5, right? You got 2 hours to find somebody." Okay. I did. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Right? So yeah, that's how come we've been married 26 years. Yes, ma'am. And God blessed me with a man who was 49, like I was, who had struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I didn't realize that I was dealing with the same thing related to not only my own health, but also the change in ministry and the trauma that my parishioners had gone through, that I had walked with them through, that now I was going through. And for 6 months, for an hour a week, we got to walk that road together. And it was a gift. I don't think I'm going to ever be over the trauma, and because I'm still living with many of the things that I've listed. But I have now tools and ways to figure out how to walk that road. And I'm more open about it. And more clear about it. And I think that's the biggest learning that I've taken from the last 2.5 years, and ultimately what I've learned in 24 years now of being a priest, is that we have to, as we create and help resource people that we're charged to lead or care for or be a companion with, we have to be thinking about, as we help someone else create a system of care for themselves, whether it be therapy, psychotherapy, a prayer group, worship, service. You can go through a whole list of things that would be just a beautiful way of living, and we heard some of that from Erica this morning about how she's creating a life that is healthy for her. So as we walk that road with other people, we have to begin to think about what does that road look like for us, right? And how do we care for ourselves? And how do we create that same system of support and care and companionship around us? And I'll tell you this, you're not often going to get people coming to you, if you're the spiritual leader of a community or a Bible study or that kind of thing, coming to you to say, how can I help you create this like you do that for others, right? That's our calling, is to go and do that for others, whether it's being a Stevens minister or a lay minister or a pastor or ordained minister. We oftentimes, what I've learned is you have to create it for yourself. You have to be incredibly intentional about that. It always helps to have a spouse who will say, go get a therapist, but it also means that I needed to reach out to friends and family and loved ones who could support me in the journey that I'm on, because ministry isn't ending, and it's just taking on a new and different dimension. In all of that, I've realized one incredible thing is that all the challenges that we faced together, our collective trauma, our individual trauma, the health issues that many of us face, when we are in a good support system and we're getting the care that we need, and for me personally, it's the prayers that many people are praying on my behalf, not just for my health, but for the ministry that I have been called to. All of it now is seen as not so much as trauma, but as a blessing. And it's a way for me to connect that I haven't had the ability to connect with before. I've lived a very privileged life. I'm a white male priest. That just says a lot right there, right? But I've lived a very privileged life. And so we have a ministry at Christ Church called Sidewalk Saturday. And one Saturday, a gentleman came to our ministry to receive some food and prayers and toiletries and housewares and that kind of stuff. And he was in a wheelchair, and he was he had a seizure. And someone called me over, and so we helped him and made sure that he was safe and that he didn't slide out of his chair and that kind of thing. And I said, you know, what can we do to help you? And he goes, you wouldn't understand what I need. And I said, well, let me try this on you. I have Parkinson's disease, and I understand you have MS. I said, we're more alike than we're different. And the whole world opened up for both of us. And we were able to pray for each other and care for each other in that moment as companions along the road that none of us ever wanted. But what a blessing that was to be there together in that road. So as I think about collective trauma and individual trauma, that's the road I've been on. That's the road we'll continue to be on. And as we look at what it means to heal our community, I think it means for us as spiritual leaders, faith community leaders, whatever that looks like for you, that we have to create an intentional system of support and care for ourselves so that we can then continue to be the intentional system of support and care for others. And I think in all of that, it becomes a blessing. And we become companions along the road for each other. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vickie, and she's going to share about her journey.
We love you, Justin. He's a great guy and a great servant in this community, and we're so grateful for you, Justin. I depend on notes. Don't trust my memory. So there we are. Long ago I was taught that, I try to stay closer to this mic. Long ago I was taught that there's a primary difference between the role of a pastor, and I use that term very, very loosely, whether we're talking about lay people or clergy, as the role of a pastor and the role of a therapist. And the biggest differentiation is that a therapist needs the client to come to them for a lot of reasons. Therapeutically, they need that client or patient to show initiative and step forward and take responsibility, etc. But a pastor, we have pastoral initiative, and that is the difference. We go to the people. Now we hope that the people also know the door is open and they come to us. But for those of us that are doers, like Justin and myself, that's tough. That's been tough because we are used to that pastoral initiative where we don't have to wait for someone to call us and set an appointment. We're trying to go find that person that's been missing or lost or that we've heard is in need. So it has been challenging. Ann already shared some background as an ordained pastor and with a lot of emphasis in my life in pastoral care, and then a specific responsibility I've had over these last 11 years and certainly through this last 2.5-year period with older adults. So when you hear me speak, you're going to hear me, a lot of what you're going to hear is through that lens of my ministry with older adults. But let me say this, and some of you in the room will not love this. With COVID, I lowered the bar. You know, we had a pastor for young adults, so we had a pastor for older adults, so we had to come up with some kind of division. Well, you know, if you want a pass for the Diet Coke or the Coke at McDonald's, the senior Coke, you might get it at 55. But, or if you want ARP, and now it'll take you at any age, but it used to be they start marketing you at 50. So we had to come up with, well, what does older adult mean? And nobody's gonna like that definition, of course. So we loosely came up with this, okay, I'll primarily work with the people 60 and older in our church. But then when COVID happened and I just had this deep need to find out how I was gonna take pastoral initiative and be present with our people, I kind of lowered the bar to 50. I didn't tell them all that I put them in my group, but I did. I kind of lowered that bar. And of course, there are always the beautiful people that are under that come to you as well. So that's just a little you need to know, because some of you may all of a sudden be feeling like I'm calling you older adults. Let me see if I can hold this and keep it close enough. So I learned, and it was quite a process to figure it out, but as a young adult, that I was living with clinical depression. So I come from that background of knowing what depression feels like. Unfortunately, I also was fortunate to get good treatment and medication that for the most part, there have been a few little lows, but for the most part has kept me very high functioning and grateful, and so it's a blessing. I know what that means. Once you experience something, it becomes a blessing in a way that you can talk to other people that feel depression and they don't feel alone, and you connect. So that is a gift, that those kinds of experiences that we have. So many of you probably heard this, or maybe it's a good kept secret, best kept secret, I'm not sure, but preachers often preach the sermon they most need to hear. So there is a very fine, so you're going to go and listen to the preacher say, okay, what do you need? But, so it's a very fine line between what we give others and what we need ourselves. It's a very thin line often. And that's what I'm very aware of, is that very thin line there. So when I first learned about my depression and realized it was a diagnosis, et cetera, I found a magnet. It was just this simple, not beautiful, wooden red apple, and it said on it, the outlook is brighter for those who look out. But it so spoke to me in the time, way back in my 30s, I think, or early 40s, that I put it on my refrigerator. First refrigerator magnet I ever had. I added a lot after that. Until we moved here, my refrigerator wasn't magnetized. I had to let go. But anyway, so that principle of we need to look out is very much, it's something I'm aware of. So when we thought about, okay, how to offer pastoral initiative, what can I do? Well, I felt compelled to sit and begin creating this email distribution list of every older adult I could find an email address for in our church. That was, and again, I started with 60 and then went back and added the 50 plus people, 50-year-olds and older. And came up with about almost 500 names, which I think was my capacity that I could send out. Some of you would see this as a very low-tech method, and some of you would see this as a high-tech method, but it was what I knew, and it was what I could manage. So I started that distribution list, and I sent out the first one on May 20th of 2020. So just very soon into the process. And from that distribution list, I realized that, I always entitled it Thinking of You, and I put the date, and I always ended it in His love, Vickie. And I realized how important it was going to be to look at the whole person and give every resource I could think of. I did this for 20 months, and I sent it out every other week. And just to give you an idea, like when members in our church started calling and saying, who in our church can't get out to get groceries? Before we were figuring out what to do with all that, we want to go help take groceries to some of our older adults. And I put that word out, and when people started saying, well, let me skip that minute. I reached out to them and I thought, we've got to leverage each other. We've got to leverage this congregation. And I said, would you please pray and ask for the names of 3 to 5 people, not your family, but beyond in this congregation that come to mind, and call them at least once this week. And so we had more people starting to connect with each other and to call. And then I see Nancy sitting over here, and I'm pleased. Nancy did a beautiful series for us that we videotaped. Nancy Abbott, we haven't talked in a while, but YMCA chaplain, I think still good. And she did a beautiful series entitled First Responders, Praying in the Moment. And one of those in particular gave wonderful instruction on how we can do more than just say, I'll pray for you. We can, in the moment, become more comfortable praying for that person in the moment. And so I sent that out and said, y'all watch this series, listen to Nancy. We need to all start praying in the moment for the people that are asking for our prayers. Yes. And we had wonderful resources that from the city, and I said, if you know anybody that needs help with the rent and the utilities and all of that, and then here's where they go, and send out those web links, etc. And we needed blood donations desperately in the city, and sent out that information about the 3-day blood drive at the Alamo Dome. And then we learned that this is later of course, but if we had already had COVID, then the blood bank could use our plasma. So sent all that out. And then we learned about the companion program in Bear County. And one thing about our congregation, and possibly like your own, we have people that live in poverty, and we have people that are very wealthy. We have both. And so as I, again, had entered those names, I don't know all those 500, but I know many. And I would keep them in mind, and I would think about, okay, this very wealthy person I want to make sure they hear this, or this very person that's struggling to survive, I want to make sure they hear this. So I made sure that, with the blood donations, they knew that you get a $5 gift card to HEB, or, with the companionship program, if you would go and sit and help companion an older adult, then you'd be reimbursed for your travel and all of that. And then as the weather started turning colder, so this is a process we were walking through, I heard people talking about their plants. Oh, we're going to have a freeze, and our plant's going to die. Well, at the same time, what was then Neighborhood Faith Convening was going to have an emergency blanket and coat drive. So I thought, hey, I'm going to help people move past their plants. So are you thinking about your plants? Are you thinking about your pets? Are you thinking about the people that are going to be outside tonight? And invited them to be a part of that drive as well. And then I heard about the Redirect the Check program. I don't know how many of you heard about it. It was so cool. Alan Schaefer, I may have pronounced his name wrong, Schaffler, an Oregon resident, had this idea of this Redirect the Check. Well, again, we have these people that are very wealthy in our church, and then thinking about them, and the idea was, hey, if you've got a reimbursement, a stimulus check, and you really want to put it to use for someone else or something else, and you don't need it, you can redirect it. And so put that news out and ask people to just pray about that if that applied for them. About 11 months into COVID, or our awareness of the COVID pandemic, I still had young adults saying, hey, we want to help some of our older adults who just don't know how to sit on the line that long to get an appointment. They can now get a vaccine, but they need help getting signed up for the vaccine. They need help getting there. And so got that word out. There are people here that want to help you to get that vaccine, etc. A lot of compassionate action, and there's a lot more. But then as I was listening and hearing and being aware of my own pulse as well as others, I realized we need to talk about compassion fatigue. Okay, we're doing what we can, but we're also getting kind of tired, and how much can we keep doing? I noticed that the term empathy fatigue was used in our program, and there's a session, next workshop group on empathy fatigue, and I think we're probably talking about something very similar, but I think most of us know what compassion fatigue is, and awareness that you may be getting tired. So just trying, again, to encourage us and speak the language of what I felt like we were feeling. And then, and certainly Justin referred to this, became aware that, I became aware, but I'll say it now, 2.5 years in, we lived through a perfect storm. We lived through complex grief. We lived through complex trauma. And yes, connections do matter. And yes, we're in a crisis with relationships because of how polarized we are. And for all that to come together at the same time, to have the COVID pandemic, to have the death of George Floyd, to have the ideas of defunding the police and knowing that Black Lives Matter and all of the politicizing of all of that, and the 2020 election, all the politicizing of that, something we'd never experienced before quite like it's been. And then this winter storm of February 2021. Could you imagine the pandemic going to the back burner because we were thinking about how to stay warm or get water? And then I noticed that some of my friends were feeling like, after the storm, and we told the stories, were feeling like survivor's guilt because they didn't have a problem at all. And then I had other friends whose pipes burst in their attic and their homes were a mess. So, and then it's like who had insurance and who didn't. So realizing we are not all at the same place. We got the beautiful piece from Anne about, passing it on about we're not all in the same boat, and realizing that pastorally we need to keep remembering our reality is not the only reality going on around us. So continuing to make people aware, realize we're getting tired, but to make people aware of how others are experiencing the trauma that's going on. In terms of focused spiritual pastoral leadership, I felt like my listening, my staying connected, my being as transparent and honest as I could be, our iron sharpening iron as we sometimes challenged each other, leading by an example and helping to maintain perspective were some of the goals that I had for that email distribution list. And yes, there were phone calls and visits that came out of all of that and people that took initiative to call. But primarily, the way I was caring for myself and staying connected was living out my pastoral call to be engaged and do what I could with these other people as well. So one of the questions I quickly asked, when we're on the other side of the pandemic, will we be able to say that our time was well spent? And kept challenging myself and all of us. Did we spend our time well, or did we waste it? I certainly would communicate in that email, friends, I miss you, I confess, I'm feeling the weariness of the days. If you ever start feeling alone, call me, da-da-da-da. About 2 months in, I experienced, I think I can safely say we, my senior pastor husband's right over here, felt one of our first big political challenges in that COVID, politics, in that we chose, and I recognize that everybody's taken a different road on this and no judgment at all, but we chose to reopen for worship with all these, precautions, masks and 6 foot apart, rows apart, and all this other stuff for people that were ready to come. And of course, we found out we had members that felt very strongly, one, we should never have closed, because you never close the doors of the church if you're a faithful Christian and faithful leader. Or 2, there's no way we're coming because we're not wearing masks and you're making us wear masks. Or 3, we're not safe and we're not coming, we don't feel safe. So we began to see the division of all of that and the attitudes. About 6 months in, it really came to me the need to balance our physical and mental care. And this really started weighing on me with a great concern that maybe we were leaning too much in the physical care and not enough in the mental care, and that we needed to do more there. And challenging how many are becoming too isolated. And I said, I want to be clear, I am not and do not believe any of us are in a position to judge the decisions others are making. We cannot possibly know what someone else's health vulnerabilities are. And so the challenge is not judging while making our decisions. 7 months in, the image of the Israelites in exile in Babylon came to mind, and I started feeling like that. Okay, that's where we are. And I remember, when they first were taken captivity, it's like we'll sit by the rivers and we don't know how, we can't live anymore. And it's Jeremiah the prophet that said, hey, you need to start planting gardens and building homes and marrying and have children and keep living. The need to go ahead and live, act on what we do know to get to what we don't know, which is one of our favorite family sayings. And so I challenged them, do you feel like you're living in exile? Well, what we do know is God wants us to be faithful to live in the times and the circumstances in which we are in. We do know that God will be faithful to be present and has a peace that goes beyond all understanding. So about 8 months in, I realized I didn't have any symptoms, but some of our older adults were really craving that Tuesday noon game time and fellowship, but we cut out the meals. But we started having those again, and it was a small group, but it was a group that was desperate for the fellowship. And so I realized that I needed to take responsibility, go down to the Alamo Dome once a week and get tested to see if I had COVID. Now, I didn't have any symptoms, but I thought, and when I was there, I remember it was almost Thanksgiving, and I saw families, all different generations getting tested, trying to decide if they could be together for Thanksgiving, and realized, yeah, we're all trying to figure this out. We're there, can we travel and go see mom and dad, or should we, what do we need to do? Y'all remember those questions, don't you? About 12 months in, we got the news that on March 29th, 2021, all adults in Texas were eligible to be vaccinated. Wow. And then the questions came, so are you going to do it? And guess what? You have every right to choose not to be vaccinated. I told them that. But I said, I must confess that if you are not vaccinated, I'm concerned for you. And this was my personal bias, but I also hope this was some of the iron sharpening iron. They wanted to come back and correct me. We're sharpening each other. And I shared some of the evidence we learned about the Delta variant at that time. That's where we were. And then about 19 months in, I asked the question, what lifestyle changes have you made during COVID? Well, we made some for the better, we made some for the worse, most of us, didn't we? Well, yeah, we're walking more, we're spending more time with our family, we're praying more, and we've lost the habit of going to church. Some people really confessionally said, a surprising number of people came to me to say, honestly, I just got out of the habit of getting up and getting dressed and going. And I realized, okay, this is not a judgment, this is a spiritual issue, and I need you to encourage. So we talked about that, and I shared the verse, Hebrews 10, let us consider how to stir one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more on you see the day dawning near. Obviously, I use scripture, we use scripture, I asked them to share scripture, many prayers, whether it was for finding a vaccine, finding a cure, healing, sense of peace, leadership, you name it, we prayed and prayed. And then as Justin already beautifully pointed out, pastoral presence, which is what my attempt was through this consistent email distribution list. I want to be sure to include, and somebody tell me if I'm out of time, because I'm not good at keeping it in my head. And
I don't know how much you'll divide it.
a couple more minutes, okay. I want to say that one of the great gifts for me personally, and in helping me to cope and helping me to have something to pass on, was the trust I felt in our local leadership. And I shared the guidance of local leadership with a lot of people. Beginning with Reverend Ann Helmke, who's busy right now, our faith liaison. She first asked us right out of the box. She said, or whatever you get out of. Anyway, she first said, well, that's why I said box. She said, what outside the holy box thinking can we do? Do you remember? Some of you got that and thought, okay, what outside the box holy thinking can we do? Maybe that's where the email distribution list came from. And then she kept giving us ideas. We need volunteers at 3 homeless care shelters or hubs. We need volunteers to make face masks for seniors and homeless. We need volunteers to make phone calls from home to Metro Health. We need volunteers at the homeless care hub. Schools are beginning. The children need face masks. Then we got that citywide survey that she passed on to us and said, hey, we need to know how everybody's doing. Our leaders want to know. And can you get your people to do this survey? And then she passed on this wonderful article from Sojourners that talked about the beautiful way San Antonio faith leaders were ministering through this time. It was a gift. We learned about the fire department and Metro Health going door to door to give vaccinations for homebound people that wanted them and couldn't get out. We had more beautiful messages from Mayor Ron Nierenberg when he said the number one need in San Antonio today is our perseverance and patience. What we're doing together is working and saving lives. We risk it all if we give in to our desire to prematurely return to comfort and convenience, because we are a compassionate city. we in all this process had to learn what it meant to care for ourselves, to care for others, and how intricately those two are tied together. We know that as people of faith, we know that from Scripture. Love of others as we love ourselves. I'll just summarize very quickly. Maybe I have 2 more minutes according to what Justin said 3 minutes ago. 1 minute, okay. Our local, I shared all kinds of wonderful local national resources. If you need any of these, email me and I'll send them to you. Wonderful articles on mental health. This was the time to highlight NAMI and Sacred and Pathways to Hope conference that happened 2 times during that online, and the new National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and Mental Health Resource Hub and 7 Cups of Tea. And we were so proud that our church, and it started before COVID, fortunately, or I don't know if we had gotten that far, started a mental health team, and 32 Trinity staff and lay leaders received 8 hours of training in mental health first aid. And that's something available for all of our churches. I'm gonna just pause here. Oh no, I've got to say this. We made sure that laughter and fun and relaxation was included in that email. I don't know how many of you went to the videos and saw the Some Good News that John, how do I say his name? Krasinski, somebody help me, John Krasinski put out there Some Good News. They're wonderful videos. He started giving them to us weekly to encourage us. There was the dancing priest that did Hamilton, and there were the bells of Banff, Canada, the school teacher that climbed the steps of the church every week and every day, rang the bells and played Amazing Grace. People that just thought of creative ways to keep encouraging each other. Last but not least, we have an invitation to become a trauma-informed congregation, and I never even heard that term till we were till probably a few months ago. I don't know. And but I think it's important for us to all understand how to be a trauma-informed congregation. Thank you.
Love you, Vickie. Are you here?
What? Oh, Claudette, you know you're invited. Matter of fact, we are looking forward to hearing you.
While Claudette's coming to the microphone, is there anybody in this room who needs CEUs and doesn't know what they're supposed to do? Great. About 15. And we can go to 20, but there'll be no Q&A.
I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't go back. I shall go, I will go, see what the end's gonna be. To see what the end's gonna be. And this is our challenge, to stay in process with God, to see what the end is going to be. Thank you for the invitation to come. My sharing will probably not be as practical, maybe more philosophical, but I pray that between Justin and Vickie and myself, you will go away with something to enlarge the work of your hands and the capacity of your spirit. Trauma, communities of faith, connections. I am a 70-year-old woman who has lived through childhood rape, cancer, tuberculosis, marriage, pastoral journey. And it is my belief that if suffering matters, it is only to matter when it can be interpreted correctly and shared meaningfully. None of us get out of this world without it. As Justin was talking about his bodily experience, I forget to mention in my litany of survival stories that I, 2 years ago, was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, a debilitating neurological disease. But I'm going to see what the end's going to be. Trauma and COVID and the living of this life. What is it that we have undergone and survived? Life-altering or life-threatening events. Life-altering or life-threatening events. If we had time, I would ask you to jot down your own. Life-altering or life-threatening events, which leave us with a sense of profound powerlessness and helplessness and soul disorganization. Trauma, social or personal, which leaves us with a profound sense of helplessness and powerlessness and soul disorganization. And with that, we are still called to wear the collar, whether it is literally or figuratively, and to be there for others. And we ourselves need someone to be there for us. We've perceived, we've experienced, or we have witnessed life-altering or life-threatening events. So what do we do, Claudette? What do we do? What do we do? In my Pentecostal life, don't get scared, not that. My community has often been one where we only confessed the triumphs. We had what we call testimony service, and we only confessed the victories. We said what the Lord has done, and how the Lord has brought us through, and what Jesus has done. I got a witness in here. But our culture did not make, my culture, my religious culture, did not make room for the truth of trauma and the truth of life-altering, life-threatening events. It had to be packaged. It had to stay underground. It had to be neatly bracketed. So we spent our lives defending God. But underground, the life-altering, life-threatening events fermented. The Bible says that we confess in order to be saved, but we confess to God in order to be saved. But a well-overlooked truth is that we confess to others in order to be healed. When we cannot find those spaces and those communities and those arenas with our truths, the sorrows and the traumas and the griefs and the losses simply ferment. But at Copeland, what do we do? I believe that little passage that said, confess your faults, your errors, your truth. Confess to one another that you may be healed. How do you do that when, my God, nobody wants to hear it? And I'm not sure I can trust you with it. I suggest that if anybody chooses to want to do this kind of work, when I'm thinking about it, I'm old, I gotta say it when I think about it. Visit me at wellnesscentersa.com, because we have arranged spaces, as some of you have, women's educational and healing retreats. We have arranged some safe spaces of beauty and nourishment and safety where we can do the work that helps people to stay the course with God and see that the end's going to be. What is our goal? What is our plan? First of all, have you found a place to sit in vulnerability? Have you found a space? All that is assigned to you, have you found a space simply to sit in vulnerability? Without a mask, without a title, without the need to be important and without the need to do, to find a space to sit in vulnerability. I'm a Protestant, but I also always admired the Catholic tradition. But at least I could go into the confessional and sit in vulnerability. In order to be healed from the things that have been life-threatening and life-altering, and that have left me with powerlessness and helplessness. In finding a space to confess my need to someone, can I sit in vulnerability? A space without shame or being shamed, and have my grief and my loss and my sorrow and my trauma and my physicality validated. Can I sit in vulnerability? Helpers don't often know how to ask for help. Secondly, can I sit in vulnerability, and can I learn, even in small spaces, to practice transparency? I suggest to you that those of us who are helpers and helping professionals and doers, and those of us who leap tall buildings with a single bound, stop locomotives, arrested, I suggest to you that most of us have very little practice in being transparent. Taking off the costume and practicing transparency. And saying to my congregation or to my small group or to my friends to say, this is true about me. And I risk you not loving me and not coming back, but this is true about me. Because you see, if I do not practice my own transparency, if I don't own it, I will lose it.
Say that again. Yes.
And it will begin to contaminate the environment that I am called to live within. Can you practice transparency? Finally, can you be clear clear, can I be clear about the process to see what the end's gonna be? The process to train myself to recover what has been lost, whether it was in COVID, whether it was in the 2 years of disconnection from my congregation, to recover what has been lost when there were people that I will never see again who I loved and who left and never said goodbye, or who died without intending to. What did I lose, and what must the process be to recover what has been lost? What was lost in my trauma? What was lost in COVID? What was lost when my congregation scattered? What was lost when there were people after people after people who died prematurely? What's been lost? Can I stay in the process as I sit in vulnerability and in transparency? Can I get in the process to recover what has been lost? And I suggest to you, and I go to myself, the job first of all is to recover safety. Yes. To recover safety. Because I don't know about you, but when I have undergone the assaults spiritually and emotionally and contextually, part of my soul has been left looking around.
Say so.
Wondering, where am I safe? God, if you let all this happen all around me, and I can't send my child out because he might be shot in the school, and I look at the news and they tell me that there is safety anymore. The process for us has to be the goal of recovering safety. So it may not all be safe, and the context may still be janky. That's a word I made up. And the world may seem like it's falling beneath me. But if I can find a little space to be anchored with a few folks, it'll help me find safety.
Yeah.
It won't be everybody. Process. Becoming vulnerable, transparent, and saying this is our process. And these folks are here with me. Maybe we can live to see what the end's gonna be.
Yeah.
But we can't do it by ourselves. Somebody say recover. Safety. Second thing I must do in the process of the collective trauma that we've been through is to recover trust. Because in this world that we have lived in, the rug has been pulled out from under us.
Yes.
We thought we had a neat worldview. How do I now recover trust? Whether I was raped, whether I was molested, whether my body failed me, whether my spouse died, whether my job went away, whether I found myself in the soup line, where in this world now do I recover trust? It must be my goal. It must be my goal. It must be my goal, because what I do as a faith leader will become contagious. The people who watch my life. What is the process in recovering for our communities of faith? Finally, I must recover rest. For my brain stays awake now. The cortisol keeps me angry, and the adrenaline keeps me on edge. And I must learn somehow in all of this to recover rest. To rest. Even though my body won't trust that it's safe, I must recover. And finally, this is the third finally, fourth finally. The process of healing our community. I think it was Andrew Park's song part, was it that it's an Andrew song part in The Wounded Heart of God, talks about the fact that we pay great attention to the sinner, to the one who perpetrates, who pay great attention to the sinner, the one who does the wrong, and so we pay attention to try to redeem the sinner, to correct the sinner, to punish the sinner. But what in our theology focuses on the sinned against? And he says it is that lack of attention to the sinned against, whether it is politically sinned against, personally sinned against. He said in the Korean mindset there is a thing called Han. And Han is the woundedness that settles in the heart. The woundedness that settles in the heart. Unless we think it is just collective or collectivity, it is also personal. The woundedness can settle in our hearts. And so the fourth assignment is to find accountability. Whether it is my therapist, whether it's my small group, whether it is coming to these kind of events, to find accountability so that I don't give in to despair and take my hands off the plow and keep in the process so we can see what the end's gonna be. The Lord has gone before us. Stay in the process.
We love you, Claudette. Okay, I have a very important announcement, and I'm not joking. There is a time glitch on your agendas. So this is really important, and you should tell the next batch if they don't know that. All right? And tell your moderators. I'm trying to spread the word, but I figured it out. So we are now at 1:14 on the clock. At 1:15, there's a break, and we move to the next workshop. Right? The next workshop starts at 1:30. All right? So you have 15 minutes, and it took me more than 15 minutes to get to this room. Anyway, the next workshop starts at 1:30, and it goes to 2:45. So every one of our sessions is 75 minutes, right? So the break is at 2:45. Workshop 3 starts at 3. Workshop 3 starts at 3 and ends at 4:15. Our day ends at 4:15. Otherwise, your next workshop is going to be kept 15 minutes short, and you don't want that. I have a couple more quick announcements, and I mean quick. One, I want to say thank you to the San Antonio Community Resource Directory, which we normally call sacred.org. Isn't that great? Sacred. It's like holy humor all over the place. Anyway, they are recording all of these workshops, and they will be posted, I hope, sometime next week on the Pathways to Hope. So you can share this workshop with your spouse, with your entire congregation, or take parts of it, or other workshops you wanted to go to and couldn't get to, you can watch those later, right? Like we do on an airplane when somebody really needs to get off to get to the next flight. Anyone who needs a CEU, please stand up now. Anyone who needs CEUs, please stand up now. Anyone who needs to, okay, you're gonna move right over to that corner before anybody else stands up, or you'll never get there. Anybody who has one or two questions for our three speakers, who are gonna come right up here, three speakers, you need to come right up here and ask them the questions, and then everybody else can leave